Hi everybody, this is Mick and Man's RCT Station, and today we're going to be running through my top 10 suggestions for how to improve your coaster designs in RollerCoaster Tycoon. I'm currently replaying all of the original RCT scenarios, so all the footage that you will see here today is from the original version of the game. However, the same tips still apply to Vanilla RCT2, Open RCT2, and RCT Classic. A lot of these suggestions you will find are perhaps more applicable towards scenario play, where you have to deal with space and financial limitations, but I think all of them somewhat apply in sandbox mode too. So, without further hesitation, here are my top 10 suggestions for how to improve your coaster designs in RollerCoaster Tycoon. Number 1. Designate a space and stick to it. One of the first things I like to do is designate a defined space that I can use for the coaster, either with a fence or using a different surface texture. Designating a space for your coaster can really help when it comes to designing your ride. Setting a space can help define the type of coaster you can build and can help drive its overall shape and layout. This can also be helpful if you're working with a limited budget, so that you don't get carried away spending too much money on a coaster that's way too big. It can also help give your coaster a more realistic feel. In this example, I've set a relatively thin but long space for a wooden coaster. It helped dictate the layout and overall look of the coaster for me here. Number 2. Use a single chain lift. Using a single chain lift or a lift hill is favourable for a few reasons. The first is that apart from the odd occasion, one is really all that's needed. A single chain lift should almost always give your coaster enough momentum to finish a complete circuit of a decent enough length. If you are finding that your coaster really needs a second lift hill, it is worth investigating why. Chances are that your coaster is already long enough as it is, or it has too high an average speed, increasing air resistance and the rate at which you lose momentum. The second reason is reduced ride time. Having more than one lift hill can increase ride time significantly, reducing the throughput and therefore profit of your coaster. I put out a video recently on modifying the Storm in the scenario Katie's World, where we completely eliminate the second lift hill, reducing the ride time by almost 15 seconds. The third reason is reduced cost. A second lift hill being used is often indicative of a coaster that is too long and therefore too expensive. Sticking with a single lift hill can help ensure the cost of the coaster is kept reasonable. The fourth reason, and this is purely my own opinion, is aesthetics. There is just something about two chain hills on a coaster that doesn't seem right. Although I know there are quite a few coasters with more than one in reality, I just don't think they're required in the game, especially in scenario play. Number 3. Avoid excessive heights. Unless you're going for a hypercoaster, kicker coaster, or purpose-built coaster for super high speed, there are plenty of reasons to stay away from coasters that are too high. Coasters that are too high can get very expensive very quickly, as the cost of all track pieces increases the higher they are placed. The speed of the coaster can also become excessive, producing ridiculous intensity ratings. These coasters can also re-enter the station with far too much speed, essentially wasting all of that built-up momentum. If you are finding that your coaster re-enters the station platform above more than say 40 to 50 km per hour, it probably means you can reduce the height of your coaster or make the coaster longer. In this example, we have two very similar coasters with almost identical stats. The brown one is almost double the height though, making it almost $1,000 more expensive, 10 seconds longer overall, and has more wasted speed upon station re-entry. This is only the cheap mini coaster though, so this cost will be exacerbated for more expensive coaster types. Here are a few examples of coasters that aren't too high off the ground, but still very effective. These are all less than 10 tiles from the ground at their highest point, and make good use of the terrain to gain height, rather than rely on the more expensive support structures. Number 4. Go underground. Going partially underground can be hugely beneficial for only a small cost increase. Building part of your coaster underground, even for a small section, boosts the excitement rating of almost any coaster, enabling you to charge more for it. In this example, we have two coasters that are the exact same design, although the bottom one has its sharp turn underground, giving the excitement rating boost. Although not one for one, generally speaking, the more tunnels you have, the more your excitement can increase. An underutilized option, in my opinion, are coasters that are built entirely underground. Coasters that are built completely underground can be extremely useful in a scenario with a wet climate, as guests will continue to ride it even when it rains. This ensures your coaster should be profitable regardless of the weather. Whilst building underground coasters can be difficult given that the amount of height to play with underground might not be much, there is a chance to build medium intensity coasters with small chain lifts, or powered launch mode coasters with a few tight turns to get that intensity rating up. Number 5. Don't overuse inversions. Inversions are often the most exciting bit of a coaster design, however they can be overdone. Too many inversions quickly increases the intensity rating beyond guest preferred limits, can become very expensive, and can be just plain unrealistic, if that's a concern of yours. Most coasters in reality have a maximum of 1 to 2 of one type of inversion. If you're a beginner, try and stick to a limit of 2 vertical loops for looping coasters to start with. In this example, we have 2 stand-up roller coasters with a similar overall layout, with the top having over twice the amount of inversions. Replacing a few of the inversions with simple airtime hills can reduce the overall intensity and also the cost of the ride. On a similar note, the speed through an inversion should also not be overlooked. Inversions can become extremely uncomfortable with high speed due to excessive lateral and vertical g-forces. Ensuring your speed is appropriate can make a big difference to the intensity. In this example, we see 2 stand-up coasters again with the same height, with one of the loops coming straight after the drop, where the second has a medium-sized hill before the loop. The speed through the second loop is far less than the first, reducing the intensity by almost a full point, and that's just based on a speed difference through one inversion. Number 6. Bank your high-speed turns. I realize this is probably on every single roller coaster tutorial video, but it just can't be emphasized enough. The most common reason a ride intensity is too high, or above 10, is because of excessive lateral Gs, most often caused by an unbanked turn or multiple somewhere on the track. In general, ensure all turns where the speed exceeds 30 km per hour are banked. If you have banked your turns but are still getting high intensities, also check your sloped turns. Unbanked sloped turns, especially tight 2x2 slope turns, also produce high lateral Gs, often causing the same issues. Generally, the only place you should be using unbanked turns are straight after the station, at the top of a lift hill, or after a brake run into the station platform. After hearing all of this, you might think unbanked turns should be avoided at all costs. This is absolutely not the case. Unbanked turns can be used to tune the intensity of your coaster so that you can optimize its effectiveness in scenario play. In this example, we have a small mine train coaster. Currently, the drop after the station underground and the following 3 tight unbanked turns is at 5 meters, which produces an intensity and an excitement rating of around 3.5. Extending this drop further to a height of 4 meters with the exact same layout elsewhere produces an excitement rating of 7.5 and an intensity of 6.9. Even though the first design has lower stats, it's actually the one I used in the scenario, as I wanted some variety in the park, given I already had 4 other high intensity coasters. Number 7. Make friends with S-bends. S-bends are one of the most underutilized track pieces in the game in my opinion. They are by far the most convenient way to get the track running one tile to the left or right without having to use multiple turning pieces, saving cost and space, which may be important. One cool feature of S-bends is that the tile adjacent to the inside of the track on each side is fully usable, meaning you can place a full tile tree, path, or part of another ride in that tile. When it comes to the scenario Rainbow Valley, where you aren't allowed to delete trees, these pieces become almost essential. Another great characteristic of them is that although they are unbanked, the turns are not particularly tight, so unless your speed is above 80 km per hour or so, they won't give you any issues with excessive lateral g-forces. Another thing I like about them, and this is less important, is that they can improve the look of the ride as it gives the track some variety and makes it look more interesting. Take a look at this part of track here. We could simply just use some straight pieces and a turn to connect the track, but the introduction of an S-bend just makes it that little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Number 8. Blend the coaster in with the surrounding scenery and landscape. This is more of an aesthetic/realism thing for me, so feel free to ignore this tip. Coasters that make full use of the terrain and scenery are the ones that look the best in my opinion. Coasters that are just plonked down randomly with little thought can just look plain ugly and unrealistic, especially ones that are placed fully over a lake or a river. Here are a few examples of coasters that make use of the available landscape. You might have heard of the term terrain-hugging coaster, which is a coaster that almost feels like it is wrapped around the landscape, often not much higher than 20 feet above the ground at any one point. Of course, make use of trees and bushes as well. It not only looks great, but boosts your excitement rating, increasing its profitability. Number 9. Experiment with the number of cars per train. Tinkering with the number of cars per train can help find the optimal amount in terms of guest throughput, and therefore profit, and ride performance. Trains with more cars have more momentum, and are therefore more likely to complete a circuit. However, you may be able to fit more trains at the same length of station if you reduce the amount of cars per train, making the coaster more profitable. Take a look at this example. The station platform gives the option of having a single train of 7 cars long, or 2 trains of 6 cars long. The profit per hour nearly doubles for the 2 trains of 6 cars, rather than the single train of 7. The queue line for the single train also fills up faster, making the guests more unhappy with the longer wait time. Be careful though, if you shorten the length of the train by too much, it may not complete the circuit, causing unfavourable results. Really long trains, especially on the junior coaster and looping coaster, can look a little too snaky on the track for my liking. In my opinion, the optimal amount of cars to go for with the majority of common coaster types is 6. Number 10. Would you ride it? Possibly not relevant if you wouldn't ride coasters in the first place, but think to yourself what roller coasters you have ridden that have worked for you in the past. Look at your design and consider things like, are the drops too high? Is that corner way too fast? Is this part of the track really that interesting? Try and build coasters that you know you would have no issues riding in reality. Watching some point of view videos of roller coasters in various theme parks can also be a great way to get inspiration and ideas for your coasters. I have a playlist of some of my personal favourite POVs, which I will link in the description below. Well, that's it. My top 10 suggestions for improving your coaster designs in RollerCoaster Tycoon. I hope you at least got a few useful tips out of it, even if you've been playing the game for a while. Thank you all for watching. Please subscribe if you would like to keep up to date with more RCT related stuff from me. Cheers.